alive while you're cleaning your glasses.
My glasses are so dirty. It's gross.
It happens.
Yeah.
I have a child with glasses, so I spend a fair amount of time cleaning dirty glasses. Because she will wander around looking through a film.
Yeah, I do too until I'm sitting in front of a window and realize what I'm doing.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome to episode I've lost track of the Coffee Klatch. Today we are talking about meet cutes. And I don't know that it's like on theme or anything like that, but I have my Cinderella mug, and it has these little mice in it, which may not be on theme, but it is on brand.
Well, yeah, my mug is because I'm currently writing a book set in the Tetons, so it's my Grand Tetons National Park mug.
That is an awesome mug.
There.
I believe I've used that mug at your house.
Probably.
I feel like I chose it because it was like mountainy. Right?
I thought of those.
Yes. So today we thought we would talk about that great story and film convention, the Meet Cute, but talk a little bit about the ones in our real lives. So I know we wanted to talk a little bit about how we met our husbands, but then also how we met each other. So which do you want to?
Sorry, I'm sharing my voice.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I know I should just like monologue for.
Well, yeah. Why don't you talk about how you met your husband?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, my husband's name is Haven. I have actually known him. Like, our story is long and circuitous, which is funny considering how young we got married. But it's just a testament to how long I knew him. So I met him at church, and he. Okay, I'm gonna preface this by saying he's almost 8 years older than me, and he doesn't remember. Like, I remember him. Like, I have memories of him a lot sooner than he has any of me. Like, he had zero awareness until we were like actually working together at the church coffee house. But I knew him when I was like 13, and he was 20. And I feel like this is now revealing a lot of like what I write. So, but I didn't he was like an adult, so I had no like thoughts of him in that regard, but like I liked him a lot, and he used to help in my youth group. It sounds so bad, but it's not. Like, he literally has no idea like who I was from that period of time. And actually, I tried to set him up with multiple other people over the course of the years that I knew him. And like one of them was like my kind of mentor person at the time who like taught a Bible study that I went to, and we were like, she's so fun, and like Haven's so fun, and like maybe they should be together. And we like tried to set them up at like church camp because they were our like respective counselors or whatever. And like that didn't pan out. Then he kind of had a thing for my like literally one of my lifelong best friend's older sisters, which I feel like is public knowledge, so if not now, it's out there. And I feel like it wasn't like as subtle as like as crushes never are as subtle as we like to think they are. Like, we were kind of like, we all knew. But that was at the point. So at some point I got a job, like when I was 17, I got a job at the church coffee shop. And that's actually where he knows me from, is that when I was older, we started working together. We were coworkers, and eventually he was my boss. And so we started working together, and we became really good friends. And we were all like a really close group of friends. And actually there's multiple people that got married like from that same like staff group of people. And yeah, I like was part of a makeover thing where like I took him shopping with another friend of mine, like so he could impress another girl. And that didn't pan out. That ended in heartbreak for him. And I was really upset about it because I was like, he's literally one of the most genuinely like decent men that I've ever known. So like I don't understand, like, but at the time, like I still felt like we were not in the same like he was not a possibility. And I remember very clearly because there were a bunch of teenagers that worked there at the coffee shop, and I remember very clearly like we were wondering how old he was because you kind of couldn't tell, and we were like, how old is he? And then I think he was like 24 or something, and we were all like, oh crap, like 25. Like we were like, that's, not gonna happen. So and everybody kind of like the whole like crew kind of had a crush on him. Like we would like watch him. We had like the coffee shop was like up on a hill, and there was a stand down at the bottom, and you used to have to like move chairs up and down when they would do meetings inside and like fill this room up with chairs so like 100 people could sit in there. And we just used to watch him do it because he would always like wear a tank top or something, so we would like watch him like carry chairs. Like we'd sit there and like be like, Haven's moving chairs, and like go. So it wasn't like serious though. Like everybody kind of had this like mutual admiration for him, and he was this like handsome older guy that we all worked with, and like and everybody was kind of like, well, obviously, like, I would marry him, like, if I could. Like, he was just so nice and, like, so handsome and, like, fun. And I then, like, at a certain point, like, there was, like, kind of, it's such a long, complicated story, but, like, there was downsizing. There ended up being only 4 of us working at this coffee shop, and we were all, like, really, really close and became, like, really good friends. Like, the 4 of us hung out all the time, and he and I were 2 of those people. And maybe it was before that. It might have been before that we really started hanging out. And like people, like older ladies at the church that like the church secretaries and stuff would always be like, hey, you guys, like, what's up? And we were always like, what? Like, why are people weird about like when they see us together or whatever? And like, we were completely oblivious to it. We became like really, really good friends. We saw each other like every day, all the time. Like we hung out outside of work. And then this girl, and it was around Easter. So this is really funny because in April of the year we started dating, this happened, and then we started dating in May of that year, because this girl called him who lived like in Portland, so she lived like 5 hours away, and she was like, this guy just proposed to me, and I have been in love with you for years, so if there's any chance that we could end up together, I have to say no to him. So if you could fall in love with me, like, let me know right now, or I'll marry this other guy. And I was like, so she's crazy. Like, so we're clear that's not, and like, I was so perturbed by it, and I was so mad, and I was like, I don't know why I'm so upset about this. Like, I just kept thinking if he had a girlfriend, we wouldn't be able to hang out. Like, he wouldn't be able to like hang out with me all the time, and like we would go out to dinner, and he would come to my parents' house and like have dinner, and we would like, but I felt like we were just friends. But like, I was so angry that like this other random girl was like calling and professing her love. And he didn't know what to do. And he's really very nice. And he's like, God bless him. He's such a good looking guy and so oblivious. Like every girl liked him except the one that he liked. So he was then convinced that like no one liked him. And like, he was like the hottest commodity at church and had no idea. Like, this is one of those like microcosms of like, it was all like this church thing. But I'm like, literally every girl liked him and he had no idea. So he was like blindsided by this and had no idea how to deal with like, and like in fairness, it was an incredibly strange thing to like dump on somebody in their early 20s to be like, well, I'm going to marry this other person if you couldn't love me. And he was too nice to just be like, you're insane. So he, anyway, so he kept like he was like, I don't know what to say to her. And I kept being like, have you called this girl to be like, no, you're insane. And like, maybe you shouldn't marry this guy, but like, I'm not marrying you either. Like, have you called? And he would be like, no, I haven't like dealt with it yet. And finally, like one night I got really mad at him and I was like, well, like whatever you decide, you're going to hurt somebody. And like, I didn't even really know what I meant by that. I just was like really like in turmoil over this thing. And then he has told me since that was kind of the trigger for him to be like, oh, well, like if that would upset her, then like, actually I know what I want. So, and that was, so I had like turned 18 during that couple of months too. And I think that made it feel more like that, like it made it feel like more like there was a possibility for the two of us to be together. So that's how that happened. So we started dating like a couple months after I turned 18 and, we got married the couple months after I turned 19. And now we have been married for 15 years next month. So we've been together for 16 years. And that's how that happened. It's like a boss, coworkers, friends to lovers, other woman, very dramatic story with a makeover that had nothing to do with like, I'm like, so anyway, that's kind of us.
Oh man. I also met my husband at work, but I'm going to start before I got that job because I do think there's like, if you believe in any sort of higher power fate thing, like there's a lot of weird things that happen in order for me to get this job where I met my husband. So when I was a senior in college, I got an English degree. Obviously, had no idea what I was going to do with that. Um, so my mom kind of said, like, you need to figure out, what you're gonna do.
She was like, get a job.
So, like, you're not coming home. No, I did. So my friend and I went to a job fair at our college, and like I was just looking at all these places, and it was like none of this. I don't know what I want to do. Like I don't know what kind of job I could get. Like I hate people. I hate having a boss. Like, none of this works for me. So me and my friend, who was a history major, so she was kind of in the same boat. Like neither of us knew what the heck we were going to do with our degrees. We're just kind of standing in a corner, and this like old guy was like, "Hey, come over here," and we're like, no. But he convinced us to come over, and he was actually the head of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, I believe, or like a person who worked there, and that was his booth, and he was just trying to get people to sign up to apply to DNR jobs. And we're like, but we have an English and history degree. And he's like, no, that's great because we have historical sites and, anybody with an English degree can do whatever. So we both just sort of like signed up because he like hassled us into doing it. And then when I was home for, I think Easter break or something, this woman from a park like 10 minutes away from my parents' house called and asked if I wanted a job interview. And I still had no idea what I was going to do. And I said like, okay. And I went in, and after I ended up getting the job, I remember she made fun of me because like you straight out lied in your interview because you didn't know anything about anything. I don't remember lying, but anyway, I got the job, which was as a seasonal naturalist for a local state park, which basically meant I had to like give programs about things at the park. We had like a summer camp where I had to teach like stuff about science and stuff. And the first day I was there, the first day I worked there, and I was kind of like, you don't expect, at least I had never really had any experience with like state park staff. I was kind of expecting them to all be old and like, not like super like into it or something. I don't know. But the first person I met there was like a girl who was like a year younger than I was. And it was like it might have been her internship or something. I don't remember. And then the next person, and then my boss was only like in her 30s. She was probably younger than I am now. And so like my first day, I remember my future husband walked in the room and I was like, oh, that's nice. I did not expect that. I did not expect young, handsome men to be a part of my state park working experience. And for some reason that made no sense because he was not a naturalist. He was like in maintenance. He had done he'd gotten a Parks and Rec degree, and so he'd done his internship there, but he was in the police academy. And so this was just like one of his many part-time jobs while he was going through the police academy doing like trail maintenance and stuff. But for some reason, my boss had him show me around the park. So like we get in the car and he like drives me around the park. And I, especially at this time in my life, am a terrible conversationalist. Like I can kill a conversation like no one's business, which I think is why it sticks out so in my memory. Because like he just kept asking me question after question, and I would, normal people, then you ask like a question back or like you start a report. No, I would just answer like these terrible one-word answers. And you have to come up with a new question. And that's just how, like, that is just his personality. He always, like, he can't stand a silence. So he is very good at talking to people. So no matter how hard I failed at continuing the conversation, he kept it going. And then he had to show me how to clean the fish tank with like a big giant, like aquarium style fish tank of native Missouri fish. So this is so romantic and so on so many levels. We had to be in this tiny little room behind the aquarium and use a vacuum to like vacuum up all the algae and disgusting fish poop, I guess. And he told me the story of the Unipooper, which was a guy he went to high school with who wrote Unipooper on the walls in the bathroom with poop. And because, like, literally, clearly I was giving nothing to the conversation and he was just scraping the bottom of the barrel. But I thought it was hilarious. So anyway, so there was a group of us who were like all sort of the same age. Like my husband's 2 years older, the other girl was a year younger, and we kind of all hung out and worked together. Um, and somehow it came up that he really liked the musical Annie. And I love musicals, but I do not like that one. So I would give him kind of a hard time for liking it. So that he only worked there for probably 2 months before he finished the police academy and got a job. And so like when he left, he was like, "Oh, Annie is at the Muni this summer," which the Muni is our local like outdoor theater. He's like, "We should go," and he like gave me his phone number. And I, having that been a group joke that he really liked Annie, like thought it was like, "Oh, we should all go." So like I started inviting other people. And our mutual other friend who worked with us had to like take me aside and be like, "No, he's asking you out like on a date. Do you want to do that? Because he's not gonna like harass you if you don't." So I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'll go on a date with him." So we did do the group date Annie, but then we went on a just us date as well.
So did you like how did you go from like going on a date to like being a couple? Was it one of those things where it just kind of happened? Like were you like and like then you just never are not going out? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I vividly remember like maybe we'd been on like 2 dates top, and it was his birthday, and like even though he'd left this job, the people at the job all got together, sort of like going away birthday party for him. And so we went separately, and he kind of like didn't talk to me during the whole thing, and I was like, "Oh, I guess this is like over." And like I kind of like hung around at the end, like seeing if he didn't do anything. So I got home thinking like, well, I don't know what the hell happened there. And like literally before I even walked in the door, he called me and was like, "Oh, where are we going to go for the next date?" And it was, yeah, we never broke up or anything like that. That was just it.
We were like, because we already hung out like every day, and it was really funny because we would hang out with other staff people all the time, but it had gotten to where if other people couldn't hang out, we would just hang out. Like it wasn't a weird thing. Like, and I do remember really clearly one of my other friends who was like in our wedding and stuff, we were really close with her. We, worked together. It was like the three of us that could go to this thing somehow. And like, it felt really weird. Like it definitely felt like, but we hadn't like paired off at all yet. It was like everything between us was so weird and unspoken. And then that girl called and like dropped a bomb in it and made us have to like deal with it. And then I still remember I did tell him, I mean, this is where it becomes very evident that it's not like I had a robust dating life. Cause it's not like I had any idea like what was going on. But when we actually did decide that we wanted to date, which was like a very weird conversation, because it was like we already hung out together every day. So it was like I don't know, like, is this a thing kind of a thing? And I wish I could say that it was like and then we kissed or whatever, but we didn't because we were too awkward to do something like that, like randomly. Like there was no, like it was a discussion. It was not a romance novel. It was like, okay, so like, I guess like maybe this is a thing. And it's friends to awkward discussion. Is that a trope? No, but like I remember, so because he was 25 and I was 18, I told him he had to ask my dad if he could date me because I lived at home. And I felt weird about it. And so he goes to ask my dad if he could date me. And my dad was like, "Were you not?" Which is like, I don't know where I come from, because then it's like one of those things. My dad was like, "Okay." Like he did not require that at all. He was literally like, "Weirdo. Like you hang out all the time. Were you not dating?" Like that's bizarre. And so yeah, but that was one of those things too, where like we already hung out all the time. And then from that point on, it was like, we were just together all the time. And like, I did know right then when it was like, okay, we have feelings for each other that are not friendship. I was like, well, like honestly, barring something, I don't know why I thought I knew that, but I was like, barring something insane, I'm gonna marry him.
Yeah.
Like I just knew it. I once we were like on that, I was like, well, he would be the one. There's not like a better guy, you know? And I remember thinking that because I was his friend and because I did like try to set him up with other girls, predominantly because I thought he would not think of me in that way because I was younger than him. And because he was so much older than me, I was like, which is really not that much older. But it was at the time. I just remember like being like, I want to find a guy just like him, but like someone who's like in my bracket or whatever. And so, yeah, so like I remember thinking that he was literally like I was like, wow, why, gotta hook him up with this girl. Why isn't she crazy about him? He's the greatest guy ever. Like, so I don't know why. It just like took me a while to catch up to that. But like I said, that's my own like clear evidence of no guy had ever been interested like back. So I was like, I don't know what to do with this. That's not true. One time, but we won't talk about that. That poor guy that I ghosted before that was a term. We walked around the mall one time and I was like, this is not going to be a thing. Speaking of times when I just knew. That's all it takes sometimes. But yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, we had like it was a very undramatic courtship.
Yeah.
And very short.
Mine was not short.
Yeah,
but
mine was. But yeah, we like, what I think is funny is that like our timelines are very similar. Like we met and started dating them at really similar times. Like I got married sooner, but still, I think it's kind of funny. And both met at work. And maybe that's why I like sitcoms like Parks and Rec and The Office so much, is that I did have that experience where I was like deeply involved with coworkers.
Yeah, I thought it was so funny. Like when and my husband left, he did not ask me out until he was not working there anymore. Mm-hmm. And so like I had to be the one to kind of like tell everyone who knew both of us. And they would always be like, oh my gosh, he's such a good guy. Oh, and they would go on and on about how great he was, to the point where I was kind of like, am I that terrible that everyone has to tell me like how
the same thing happened to me? Because so first of all, it was vastly unpopular with women his age when he started dating me. I was not a popular person. So, because while like I would say by every other standard, we were quite young to get married, like not at our church at that time. So like there were a lot of women in their mid-20s that were feeling very like he was like one of the last good ones kind of a thing. And I showed up and like turned 18 and started dating him. So I was like very deeply unpopular. There were a lot of like women who wanted like, and actually this is really funny. So my mom met Haven before I did, and he was a pretty young teenager. And he asked her something like jokingly if she had a daughter or something like that. And she was like, yeah, but she's 10. So unless you want to wait for her to grow up. Because he was like 18. So anyway, we did not meet, but he like said that to my mom. So anyway, but my mom was like, well, I'll adopt you. So actually because my mom worked at the church too. It's a whole thing. But like so she knew him really well. And that was another thing that like my parents knew him really well. So they were very like, I mean, it didn't matter that he was older or whatever. They didn't feel like we had a discrepancy in like our ages, really. They felt like we were pretty evenly matched. But I had all these people be like, he is really a very nice guy. So like, don't hurt him. And I'm like, how did I get some kind of a reputation that I might be the one who caused pain here? Like I'm the younger one, and everybody was more concerned about him. So, yeah, that's just kind of a funny thing. I had that like exact same experience. So yeah. And then, so that's kind of that's my husband's story.
Mine too.
Yeah. And so I guess like in terms of how we met, you and I are meet cute, which I'm never going to say that again, ever. Yeah. I'll never say it again. No, I met you online. And like the very honest version of that story is that I think I was really newly published, like not and you won a copy of one of my books. and gave it a 3-star review.
I did.
And I was very new, so I looked at all that stuff. You know what I mean? So it was like my 3rd book. And I remember being like...
completely not published at all, so I had no idea anyone would ever look at.
I know. Well, it's so funny to look back on it because I'm like, it was in both cases such a new person thing. Because like you weren't published and I was, but I was new enough that I was like looking at and I'm like, I don't look at everything now. Like, and I wouldn't remember, like, I wouldn't like care either anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't, like at the time though, I was like, hey, I sent you that for free and you didn't like it. And so I remember being like I followed you online, but I would always be like, she's that person that gave my book 3 stars when I sent her a free one. And then I knew who you were, and before that though, like going back further, before I sent you a book, I don't even know why I followed you because I don't think I was published.
It was the Harlequin message boards.
It must have been it because I hadn't sold yet. And you weren't published either. So neither of us were. So we like followed each other on Twitter and we had babies on the same day. And I just vaguely remember that. And like, it took me a long time to connect that back to you, to that being you. But then, you know, now that we've talked about our kids and stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, like, well, I mean, I know your kids, but like, so that was, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But so we knew who each other was for a really long time, but didn't actually meet until, what year was that?
2013 at the RWA conference, which was my first conference. And
Yes.
I actually, the only reason we met is because you were rooming with Jackie.
That's right,
and
I was.
Jackie and I were at the same publisher. And so we had like kind of made plans to meet up and talk about that. But Macy and Jackie were rooming together. So like, kind of all like,
yeah,
sometimes you just run into people and stuff like that. But
that was actually the first time I met Jackie too. But I had known Jackie really, really well for years online. And like we would talk on Skype and stuff. So I knew Jackie personally already. But I didn't really know you personally at all. I just knew who you were. Like I knew your name. And I knew like we had gone back and forth on Twitter a couple times, but like never talked privately. And then, I remember like we met and I said something really embarrassing to you, which like will haunt me forever and I won't repeat it here. But that's one of those things.
I don't remember it at all.
Well, I'm like, that's how you can tell that I wanted to be friends though. Because like, that's how I can tell. Cause I'm like, I still remember that I said something really stupid. And that I was like, oh, like, that was dumb and awkward. Like I'm just awkward. And so then, yeah, like I just remember, and so I saw you like off and on over the conference, and then like we ended up skipping the Rita and sitting up in that balcony for literally hours and laughing really hard about stupid things and like at the same really distasteful joke. And by the end of it, I was like, well, I won't ever offend her. So that is good. And so then after that was when you sent me All I Am.
All I Have.
All I Have. It was not very long after that I read like my first book of yours. And I was like, well, I loved that book. I read it all in one sitting and I had been like DNFing things like repeatedly. And I was like, this is the first book that I've been able to finish in like weeks. And and so like, I don't know, like from that we kind of started emailing and stuff.
Yeah, we would email each other our books.
Mm-hmm.
I offered to help you with Part-Time
Yes.
Cowboy. My husband had worked at a sheriff's department before. And then we roomed together the following year at conference.
We roomed together in, was it Texas?
I guess it had to have been.
Texas?
Yeah, it must have been. San Antonio.
It was, so I mean, that's when we started rooming together. Which, for those following along, I did not ditch Jackie. She occasionally brings her husband. I'm not invited to room with them. Jackie sometimes brings her family. So when her handsome doctor husband comes to the U.S., we do not room together. But yeah, so that's when you and I started rooming together, and then it's just practical. It's like, I still remember though, like when we were like both on Spotify, and then we were like, should we be Facebook friends? And like, it's such a funny thing when you're like, you're publishing friends and you're trying to like cross over into that non-professional friend space, but you don't want to be weird. And so you're like, oh, we can be Facebook friends. And then that's so funny to me now, because now I'm like, we're obviously personal friends, like, and it's totally through publishing, but like, I've been to your house, so
yeah,
it's not like I know your husband
pretty
and
much.
children. So,
We've been to Disney World together.
yeah, we've been to Disney World together twice.
Like, purposefully.
And every time I'm like, life is so weird, because you were this person that I knew vaguely on the internet 10 years ago, and like now we talk all the time. So yeah, that's kind of like that's our friendship story, I guess, which is you know, very aspirational and weird.
I mean, that's how friendships are built.
It's true. And I was like, I don't like, I'm going to be mushy and like gross and weird. I'm just going to make it weird. I'm like, well, I've like rarely had that experience where you meet somebody and you're like, I feel like we could be related.
Yeah.
Like there's so many bizarre like parallels to like things that we liked when we were younger. And I think we've both said multiple times we would not have been friends in high school, like at all. Because you liked Fly Under the Radar and I did not. I was a little bit I'm a theater kid. So that is that. And I definitely had like, I mean, I think what we had in common was that we were not cool.
Yes.
But I handled that in a different way than you did.
Yes.
I was also homeschooled though, so a lot of my attention seeking was like for my cat. So it's not like I had a big audience. Top of my class though.
There you go.
Yeah. But so I'm like, I'm the dork from way back. But so yeah, like it's just such a funny thing, because it's like, and I guess it stands to reason, because it's like there's a lot of writers that I'm nothing like, because obviously we all approach things differently. But what I would say about like the people I have made really close friends through writing is that we have like bizarre amounts of things in common, and think like probably the most kindred like friends I've ever found. Because when you find someone who thinks about writing and story in the same way that you do, a lot of other things are similar.
Yeah. And the sheer amount of writing and thinking about writing that we do is not often matched in other professions.
No. And that's the thing. It's like, I have lots of friends. Like I have friends who aren't writers, you know, like I have friends from years, you know, past and things like that we weren't writers. Like what we have in common is that we were teenagers together, you know? But it is like when you have friends who are writers, it's like, well, we could talk about this stuff endlessly. And like the things that we talk about would be so boring to people who are not into it. And it's like, it's kind of amazing when you can make those friends in the writing community, because you know that you can talk about the thing that interests you like endlessly, and they understand it, and you're not boring them. And, you know, so here I am back to close friendships with a coworker for better or worse.
It works out.
It works out. It really does. And that was totally an experience of being like, oh, like when you find like, yeah, that, I don't know, just like meeting another person that like thinks so similarly to me, but then also is different. And it's good because like, you're the friend that like also tells me to like get it together.
I can't imagine why people told me he's such a good guy. Like,
but I respond to it too. So like, it's clearly a good, like, you know, I'm the optimist, and you're like, okay, but like quit whining now. No, like, are you sad? Like, pull it together. About silly things, to be clear, not about anything serious. Like, I'm talking about like when I'm complaining about, I call them like flying pony whines. Like when I'm like, ugh, my flying pony isn't producing gold bars anymore or whatever. Like when I'm complaining about stuff that's like really stupid. And like, I feel like I have friends who like try to be very sympathetic to me, which is like very nice and appreciated. But like also it's very appreciated when somebody's like, meh, but you're dumb. Like, it is like, it's good to have that person that's like, okay, but like also you could, like, what are you going to do? Like, go do work. Like, it's, maybe I'm not, hey, we all need that friend. That's real friendship.
All right.
It is. I meant it as the highest of compliments. I did. I guess now we can talk about fictional meet cutes now that I've like you're welcome to you can talk about how you put up with my raccoon gifts. I mean,
do I or do I just ignore them?
hey, I was giving you a minute to make me sound like um you do ignore them. It's true.
I do.
And you're the only person I put up with that from.
I feel so blessed.
So, I don't let anyone else ignore me. Just imagine what that looks like.
Oh.
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, so like I don't know, are there any fictional meet cutes?
I mean, so
Like?
this was actually my idea for a topic, and I really can't think of any.
I know, I was like, I mean, other than like really obvious like high concept setups, I'm like, that's not. But you know what? Going back, do you want to know what? Which is what I keep saying to my husband and irritating him because it's a very Letterkenny space over here. But I actually, what I have noticed is that I tend. Now I just realized a commonality between my friendship with you and my romance with Haven, which is not weird at all. But it's actually true of like all my friendships. I'm like, I'm not one to jump into relationships. I need to like have like there's a groundwork situation. Like there's a past history. And what is true about my books is that I do not like to write strangers. Not in the cowboy books. I do it in presents because it works really well to have like a high concept, like big meetup, and they're shorter books. But like my favorite cowboy books to write are the ones where like they have this, and even in my women's fiction, the romance is kind of like this. It's a like a previous history, and maybe they didn't like, and even actually a lot of the friendships are that way too. It's like, well, you've known this person, but they haven't like circled into your life in this meaningful way yet because it wasn't the time. And so I think actually my favorite romances to write are like that. Like I think of like Bad News Cowboy, which is like the best friend's older brother, or like Broke Down Cowboy, which is like Friends to Lovers, which is another favorite of mine to write. But it's that like slow changing of how you see someone when you're ready to have that. And so I think that is something that is like, rather than like a meet cute, is actually something that speaks to me on a really deep level because that's been my experience in life is that like you cannot know someone, like you know someone vaguely on the internet, and then once you get the chance to like know them, you're like, oh, like that person was just sitting there like waiting to be this like then now like life defining kind of friendship, or like this, you know, like the one in the case of my husband, like the romantic relationship, and I knew him and he was around for years and years and years. So I think, you know, that says a lot about how long it takes me to trust people, first of all. And like the only way I could have ever married young was somebody like that, who I had seen around for years and years and years and seen his behavior and like known like who he was and what kind of quality of person he was and all of that. And then like honestly stay with my friendships, like very slow growing, like, you know, you're like out there and like, so maybe that's why like meet cutes don't really speak to me in general and why I can't think of any that are like my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I really like a small town or a cowboy, and I think a lot of time there's not a lot of like, I don't like a lot of slapstick humor, and I feel like that's kind of
Yeah.
the connotation to a meet cute is like they bump
Embarrassment.
into each other or something like
Yeah.
that, which is just not my personal cup of tea. In a book, I love when they hate each other at the beginning. I do
Do
love a
you?
good enemies to lovers, and I don't know what that stems from, except that I really like banter and like teasing. So that's sort of my love language. Um,
I haven't noticed.
I know I keep things really like hidden
I know.
and
Yeah.
close to that.
The dark horse, Nicole Helm.
I was thinking about movies and like rom coms. I really do love Kate Leopold's one of my favorites, and I don't really know how to like characterize their meet cute, but like obviously she does not know he's out of time, and so like I think that sort of element of you have a meet cute where like one person is sort of clueless as to what's actually happening. I enjoy that a little bit. Like Miss, what would you call it? Like they think someone, like if the guy walked in and he's like, you think he's the servant, but he's really like the billionaire or
Right,
whatever. Like
right, yeah. Mistaken
characterized.
identity kind of a
Yeah,
thing, yeah.
yeah, I enjoy that.
I'm just thinking,
Right?
I kind of like that too, because I actually really like You've Got Mail. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't care that, you know, people hate him. I like it.
Oh, I love that
And
movie.
it's, you know, I love it. And I think there's something about that I really like. And then, but like true to what I was just saying, I think like some of my, like my favorite Lisa Clay Pass is Married by Morning, which is Win and Kev. And they've known each other for years. And so it's that slow, like, and there's like a mistaken identity element in that book when he comes back. Because he think she's like a prostitute.
I don't remember.
I think he does.
See, that's the problem for me with meet cutes. Like by the time I get to the end of the book, I don't really think about the beginning of the book anymore. Like as a reader, like their happily ever after is kind of, or like a scene is what sticks with me, but I don't often remember.
No,
like,
now I remember because he's been in love with her for years and years. He took himself off. He comes back and she's in his hotel room because she's looking for him. And they were like raised together. So she doesn't like think anything of going into his room. And when it's a historical romance for those who don't know. And so that would have been kind of a racy thing, but they were like family. So she didn't really think of it. And then he mistakes her for a prostitute. And when he like kind of grabs her from behind, she's like, oh, is this how you treat women now? And he's so like appalled with himself.
Yeah, I like that.
And I remember that because it was so like scathing and he was so like horrified. Because he hides like so much of himself around her, like because he tries to be better because he's in love with her, but he's like protecting her and she's kind of sickly. Like it's so many things I love. And so, Stephanie says my favorite and the first book of many I've read is Untamed Cowboy, Bennett and Kaylee. Maybe it's because I was almost late to senior prom because I had to pull a baby calf. Now that's a good story.
Love it.
I did not go to prom, but I was homeschooled, like I said, so it would have been a very small prom. So I did get invited to someone else's prom in a group, but I was like, hard pass. I've seen teen movies. I want nothing to do with your spiked punch. I was not very popular for a variety of reasons. Someday we'll talk about my living history days, which was also when I was a teenager. Very weird that I wasn't one of the cool kids. So yeah, and then like and then I just watched the new Emma, which we talked about last time. I love the old Emma, and that's another one where it's like they knew each other already. And it's a changing, you know, kind of an evolving relationship. And I do think those are the ones that stand out the most to me. And like meet cutes, it doesn't mean I don't like that, but I think they don't stand out for me in the same way that like that moment where like the way that you feel about someone changes. Those moments in film and books are like what stick with me. And so yeah, and definitely as I think April said in the comments, she has noticed that I do that. I did write, I did fully just write like a book with strangers in the, in Gold Valley, but it's not out for a while. But I've done it like twice.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while I do it.
It just makes more sense when you have a small town that they already know each other, because that's what
I think that's part of the fun. And I mean, that's the thing. I live in a small town. So like that, like the connections between people and the weird people who like did get married, like that you knew in like other contexts is like such a thing. Like I'm going to totally tell someone else's story. And, because there was this guy that I liked like casually for a while at a coffee stand. And I just thought he was really cute and really fun. And like, I would go talk to him and stuff while he was working, and I was like 17. And, it was like right before I started dating my husband, which was like the time when I was like the most confident in myself and like the most like relaxed about like I could just like talk to somebody and not feel like I didn't really care if the guy liked me back or whatever. I was like, oh, I'm just talking to him because I like him, so that's fine. I had like a very small window of that in my life. And yeah, and I just really liked him and thought he was really cool. And then I started dating my husband. Like this guy it never came to anything. I still thought he was a really cool guy, like, but he never made a move and I didn't like him enough to like do anything. So, started dating my husband, but I would still go through and like talk to this guy sometimes because I did really like him like as a person and as a friend. And he said to me, he was like, I really like this girl. And I had mentioned at that point that I had a boyfriend and all that. And he was like, well, I really like this girl who drives through the coffee stand sometimes, but I don't know if she likes me. And I was like, well, you should do something about it because I actually liked you and you didn't do anything and I went and got another boyfriend. So like I was like, I think you're a really great guy and I think you're cute and I think she probably likes you if she's like, going, like if she's driving through and talking to you and all that. So you should ask her out. And he was like, okay. And so he asked her out. And then later I found out the girl that he asked out was one of my very best friends from like back when I was in elementary school. And she lived up the road from me and I spent a ton of time at her house and they ended up getting married. And they're still married. And so I'm like, I take slight credit for that. But it's just one of those, like, I'm sure he would have gotten around to it eventually because they were obviously meant to be. But it's like one of those small town things where it's like two people who I had been connected to at different times in my life, like ended up together. And I love that stuff. Like, that's what I love about writing small town romance is that's so, like, real for me. Because I live in one of those places that, like, people do leave, but they often come back eventually. So it's like things circle around. Like you're always running into people and they're always like, it's like, whoa, that person ended up with that person. And like, even if it's like years later, like they get divorced and get together, like, and all that kind of stuff. That just like happened with some of my mom's friends. And like, so it's like crazy stuff. And I love exploring that because I think that's the fun of small towns is the kind of vaguely knowing everyone's business.
I think that's why people like to read it. Even if you didn't have that experience, like that's the enjoyment that you could have this place where everybody kind of knows stuff about everyone.
Yeah. And then like readers kind of hopefully get that sense too, that if you've like shown them all these people, watching them all get together is a little bit that way where you're like, oh yeah, I thought they'd end up together or, oh, I didn't think they'd end up together. That's crazy, So, and I'm so self-indulgent, honestly. I just like always like to write what I like to write.
Yeah.
I'm like, I should mix it up, but I just like what I like.
Yeah, I don't really think about it. Like, I'm like, oh, right, I've written like, I don't know. It's harder. It's different and intriguing.
It is definitely. No, it's funny because like I didn't notice that I did that until I had done, I don't even know how many books in the series. And then I counted up like how many times I had put people together that didn't know each other. And it was a very low percentage. And I was like, oh, because I don't do that in Presents. And that's where I started writing. So I never really thought of it. Because in Presents, I think it's great to like throw strangers together. And like he's a Presents hero. So it's like he's like this alien being that's like dropped in front of her. And she has no idea what to do with him. So yeah. And that has nothing to do with meet cutes. But
yeah.
Oh, well. So does anyone have any questions for us or anything? Like AMA? AMA. Ask me anything. And we will answer your questions unless they make us uncomfortable, and then we'll sidestep them awkwardly.
Yes, we will.
But that's for us to decide, so, give people a couple seconds to...
Yeah, I didn't prepare well for my subject today.
I know, I didn't either. Well, I mean, I know the first two stories I'm, like, conversant in, so that was easy. The fictional stuff, not as much.
So at some point we should talk about Happily Ever Afters then, since that's apparently all I remember.
That is true. Like, the best and most, like, romantic Happy Ever Afters. We'll obviously have to cover that eventually. How are your kids doing with the homeschooling?
Super.
Yeah. That's, all three of mine will be doing it for the first time tomorrow, and they all three go to different schools, so it's three completely different methods. So looking forward to that. All right, so, okay. So April says, when doing an initial meeting, how soon into the chapter within 2 to 3 pages should the characters meet? That really depends on the length of the book.
And what kind of book you're writing.
Yeah.
Like what subgenre. if I'm writing an intrigue, they kind of have to be together on the page pretty quickly because I don't have a lot of space.
Yeah.
Same for presents.
Yeah, I just said to somebody, they were in there's a Harlequin writing group, which if any of you are aspiring writers, I recommend joining. I like to give a lot of advice in there because people are actually soliciting it. I love to give unsolicited advice too.
Harlequin Connection?
Yeah, the
No?
Harlequin Connection is for readers. So the Harlequin writing group is for aspiring writers. And
on Facebook.
somebody had just asked, they have to like cut 10,000 words out of a manuscript they wrote for presents. And basically my advice was, can the first line be the trope, like be the meeting? Like in a presents, I think if you can drop the reader right into that meeting, like right there, like he's there, like, and he's like, well, you know, why did you not tell me about my child? Like, obviously I'm taking the child back with me. Like if you can start like, you see, Kara, I am not a patient man. If you can start there, like that is the way to go for me with a presents. Like if you can open with that and then kind of explain, you know, kind of explain it with backstory, like drip feeding that in later, then like that's great. And in the cowboy books, it really, really depends because like I'll go a chapter, you know, with like just her, just him,
setting the scene.
Yeah, setup. It just depends. Like some of them, you know, require that, and then some of them it's like right. Yeah, like some of them are better. Like yeah, I don't really. That's much more up to like what works for the book. Like I kind of try to do a chapter where they're not together just to kind of build anticipation, but sometimes they're talking on the first page. Like that's just, it just really depends.
I have seen in some of the category, what do they call it? Guidelines. Like they want the characters to meet as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So like if you are sitting there writing for a specific thing and there's guidelines anywhere, like the best thing to do is to read those guidelines, really understand them. And if they don't mention the thing that you're thinking about, so if they didn't mention that they have to meet right away, then that's probably not your top priority to think about. Like you can probably deal with it how it feels right. But if they mention that, then obviously you want to do the things that
and I would just say if the books are under 70,000, they like as a general rule, I would put them together really quick. Just because anything like, I mean, I think like intrigue, I feel like you can wait half a chapter or a chapter to put them on the page.
Because the most important thing in an intrigue is the mystery, the intrigue, as it were. But typically speaking, the characters are working together, so the quicker they can be shown how they're going to do that, the better. I will say the one I'm writing right now, they don't meet until the second chapter because it's setting up the mystery from one person's point of view. So it does depend. And
it definitely depends.
You know, each book is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, Presents and Desire are shorter though too. Like my desires tend to be 45,000 words. My presents tend to be 50. And they need to be. They are also books that the presents especially just don't have secondary characters. There's really nothing going on but that clash between the hero and heroine. So, April, you can find the guidelines on. It's like submittable.
Yeah, I'm gonna link. April.
Perfect. I was gonna say. So it's on harlequin.com. Nicole will put a link. And so Sharon has asked, what has been your favorite meet cute or lack of meet cute to write? April, you can find the guidelines on. It's like get my voice off the screen.
I'm trying to
gonna say. So it's get it off. I don't ever need to know.
After the video is over, I will link April.
Yes. Okay. And so no, I was gonna say I always and forever have like a bizarre soft spot for. It's not really a meet cute, but I have written a couple presents where there has been some bizarre stuff with like I had one where the heroine was a surrogate for the hero's ex-wife and he did not know that had happened. And so the heroine shows up like 9 months pregnant with his baby and she thinks he fully knows that she's like having their baby and he does not. And so I would say like her showing up, like a stranger showing up and being like, I'm pregnant with your baby is like one of my highlights. And then I've done that in a cowboy book too, like because I had an IVF mix up with a cowboy and an IVF mix up with a prince, and those are always fun. But then also I did write a presents where it's like, and I feel like you could only do this in a presents. Like that's why I like my meet cutes in the presents, because they're like crazy. There's one where they're at a masked ball and they have sex against a wall, and they don't know who each other is at all. They like, she thinks that she's had this like wild experience with a stranger. He thinks the same thing. During a conversation with her brother, he realizes it was his best friend's younger sister. And the brother is like, oh my gosh, I'm like, my sister is pregnant and whatever. So that's how he finds out. And she doesn't know who the father of her baby is because he was wearing a mask. And the hero knows before she does. And so that was one of my favorite, like, because he had to show up and be like, hey, it's me. Like, just FYI. And they don't like each other, so that's a whole thing. And then obviously he whisks her away on her private jet and forces her to marry him because it's a presents. And he's a billionaire. He's a Spanish count.
So, can you say the question again? Because I lost my Facebook page. I can't see the comment.
Okay. Your favorite meet cute or non-meet cute to write?
I do like when there's a weapon involved. I can't imagine why I write intrigue. But this actually wasn't in an intrigue. This is in my book, Outlaw Cowboy. And the heroine is like sneak living in the little shack on their property. And the hero and the heroine know each other from childhood. But she's hiding in there, and he like comes to check out like what the deal is, and she's like holding a gun on him.
Sure.
And then they get to argue. I mean, I like anytime there's an argument. I think the beginning of Wyoming Cowboy Justice was one of my favorites, right? Again, they knew each other. They don't like each other. They bicker in his saloon.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I like a good bickering to start off a book.
Brady.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good, like, I do think also one of my other favorites is Smooth Talking Cowboy, when she's got a flat tire and she's on the side of the road, and she does not like him at all, and he drives past her. Like, she's like, oh no, it's Luke, and he's gonna pull over and I'm gonna have to do, and then he drives past her and she's like, but then he comes back because he's just being a jerk. So that will always be one of my favorites because it epitomizes their characters, where she's like, oh, I would never, and so like beset, and like, but then he didn't help her and she's like even more annoyed, and he's like just harassing her. I don't think I have any that involve weapons, which makes me sad.
Now you have a challenge.
I do have a challenge. Let's figure that out. She comes with a plate of cookies in that one I just wrote, where they are strangers. She rolls up on his cabin with some cookies, but that's not a gun.
No.
And yeah, I mean, between us, we have some crazy stuff. There's a lot of farm animals. There's llamas.
In the beginning.
I guess the intrigue that you just wrote has some farm animals quite up front. That's a good meet cute, but nobody's read that one yet, and they can't yet, so that's not really fair. But that's a good meetup because he thinks she's like a terrorist.
Yeah, and then she injures him and chains him to bed in her shed.
Yes, he's chained up to the bed.
I pat myself on the back for that one.
That one was pretty great, I have to say. Yeah, so those were fun. I think Presents has the best. I have to say, like, I think Presents has the best meet cutes, or like they're not cute, really.
Yeah, that's not the right word.
But the problem with Presents is that a great many of my Presents ideas begin with that, because I think that Presents opening scene is like the thing that like makes them fun. But then you have to write a whole book out of this insane idea that you had, and that is what is not fun about writing Presents. Is that you're like, but wouldn't it be great? Like, one of the ones that I will often just like be sitting there and then suddenly have a Presents opening and like write it down, and then I'll save it for a while, like till I can get to it. And like, I wrote this one where they're like stepbrother and stepsister, and she's literally thinking about stabbing him with her pen, and like she hates him so much, and then they like have sex in the office because they've like had feelings for each other forever. And I'm like, I love that, and then you have to figure out how to power the whole book with that. But like a good presents like opener is always memorable. Oh. Well, all right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again. We'll be back on Thursday talking about, maybe we'll talk about happy ever afters. Maybe we'll talk about something else. We don't know. We'll see. We're super spontaneous.
Yeah.
Super spontaneous. As I've clearly made the case for my spontaneity by talking about how it literally took me years to lead into both my prime romantic relationship and our friendship.
You are nothing if not off the cuff.
Completely off the cuff. I do not at all have to be like coaxed like a raccoon.
You're not the person who has to practice the presentation 500 times before.
Nope. I am unknowable. I am the wind. I cannot be tamed. The greatest of all fictions is that I'm like, what? I'm the fun one. I'm the spontaneous one. This is not true. Okay, I will say that. I will say that before we go. Ray, our friendship. So we've given a great many workshops together. And so I'm always like, let's go over it. And like, so literally picture this, please, because you guys don't know, like she's dressed very casually for these videos, but like Nicole is perfectly put together at conference, like absolutely 100%. And then she'll like come in from whatever thing and like get into bed and like cover up with a blanket. And like, so I have all these memories of me like pacing the room being like, we need to go through the workshop. And she's like laying in the bed, like probably still wearing her high heels and like her pencil skirt. And she's like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, we need to practice it. She's like, I was a teacher. I literally did this for a job. It's fine. I have a lesson plan. It's fine. It's fine.
And it always is fine.
It always is fine. And I'm literally like, but what if we prepared like months in advance? And here's menus 6 months before we go on a trip. I'm like not a very chill person, and I like to think that by planning things that I can control everything that will happen in the future. So down to menus.
So a question for people watching. Do we have enough people who are trying to be writers that we could do like a workshop?
Oh, yes, because we do workshops. And we pitched some at the conference that is like now not happening. So
yeah. So if there is a writing topic that you would like us to cover, we can certainly tackle that as well.
Absolutely. Sharon also asked, so before we go, we'll answer. If there are more questions, we're happy to sit here and answer. It's just like I just don't like to like ramble on it, rabbit on. She says, I want to hear how you write sex scenes. Do you giggle as you write them? No, I don't. I mean, I actually get so I dictate, and I actually get like full on theatrical, like during like the more dramatic and cheesy the better. So like toward like when I'm doing a black moment, I like perform that stuff. Like you don't even know. It is like, and I'm like, and I loved you and comma open quote. Like I don't like it's so like I get super into it, and I always have like when like if I'm in the zone. Even when I typed and I didn't dictate, I would like mouth along with like the black moment or whatever. And I get that way with love scenes too, because they tend to be like the really intense scenes I actually just get so involved in that and like I will hear stuff coming out of my mouth that's like over the top and like super cheesy. And I'm like, I don't even care, because like if you're in it, you're in it. And like I'm willing to like go way over and just see where it lands. And it's great because I send my stuff to Nicole. So if it lands terribly, then she can be like, I might want to dial that one back about 20% there, Squirrely Dan. So she can be like, really? But that leads to a lot of things too, where I get like, I'll get copy edits back. And like, especially with category, like they don't always show you, the copy editor doesn't always signal what they change. They do in my single titles, and they do now with category, but they used to not. So I remember I would get copy edits and be like, I did not type like his manhood. Like I did not put that in. The copy editor fully did that. And then I would like pull up the original manuscript and be like, nope, that was me. Okay, well, good to know.
I would say that in the beginning, I found love scenes very uncomfortable. Like when I was just starting out. Um, but I've written like a billion books now, and it doesn't really bother me. They are not my favorite scenes to write. I do not get dramatic with them. I usually, well, dramatic in the way of I don't want to write this. Can't I just skip it? And it's because I think that in a way that not like I think sex scenes, if you're going to include a sex scene in a book, it has to be really important. It has to
Yeah.
move the plot along. And so it's not just that they're having sex, it's that it means something and there's all this other stuff going on. So it's more complicated scenes, I think, than a lot of the other scenes. Like even like I also don't really like writing fighting scenes because I don't like staging things.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to that. Plus there's a an emotional component to it
Yeah,
there.
there's like a lot of layers that you have to get right. And so I find that the best way to do it is I write like a really basic version at first, and then I can go back through edits and sort of like layer it in and describe better. But it's definitely not a giggly feeling because I sort of uh, dread it.
Well, and I actually always think like I have to write when we're done here. I wrote like half my words this morning. I ended my now I hate it. I hate it when they're the thing I leave for myself to do in the morning. That makes me really angry. I do not like I need to ease into that stuff. Like I don't want to be doing that. I'm not going to there's really nothing I can say. I've walked myself into a bad corner here. But I don't want to wake up and write it. That's beginning and end. I don't want to do that. So if that is coming for my day, I do have to put it off then. I can't, like at 8 a.m., I can't look at that. But like for this afternoon, and I've done some writing today, so like I'm in the characters and stuff, like that'll be fine. And usually like, yeah, I don't know. So, but yeah, but not giggly. No, like not embarrassed. I will say they are during edits sometimes one of the harder things for me to read over. Like I don't want to read someone's commentary on it.
Yeah.
So like if that so that is they are the hardest thing for me in review.
Yeah.
That I will say is that I'm like, and my mom's gonna read this book. My grandma's gonna read this. So and then my pastor's wife. So then you're kind of like, oh, maybe not so fun. But you know, yeah, when I'm in the zone, I'm like committed. And then that's when I'm like, whoa, I went a little over the top with that one.
Yeah.
Cause that's my thing is like, I'll fully commit in the moment. And then later I'll be like, I could dial back some of that language, which I actually spend a lot of time doing. Cause I would say that I probably write at a much higher heat level than ever ends up going out.
I think it's easier to do it that way.
It is, because then I'll like go back and smooth it out. Like it's honestly it's overkill. Like no one's missing anything. I don't actually change what's happening. I just change some of the language around it. But I don't overthink it in the moment. I'm just gonna like write what works in the moment, and then I will like finesse it later, and make it more palatable. I don't know. Yeah, so maybe we will do a workshop then. We've got some interest on that. And thank you guys so much who are saying that you are enjoying these, because I know we're really enjoying these. It is like giving me an excuse to put like real clothes on every day, which is great, because otherwise I would probably be in my pajamas. It's keeping me honest and keeping me like not a swamp creature. So that is a very good thing. And we'll be back on Thursday. And in the meantime, I guess we'll discuss a workshop, and we'll either do it during our regular time, or maybe we'll come up with a special time. But we will, if you have like workshop suggestions or questions, we also like have some that we could give, like that we already have. So so we're open to anything. We're here. Like this is easy for us. It's not a great sacrifice or anything. No. Like this is better than a lot of the other things we could be doing. So so thank you guys for tuning in and for making us feel not alone. So we will see you on Thursday. Bye.
Bye.
I can't see the button. There.